Welcome, everyone, to Mythstorie, a podcast about myths and history. I am Bryant. Joined with me is Cammy, as always. Hello, Cammy.
Hi, Bryant. How are you?
You know, I'm here. I'm hanging in there. We're feeling a little stony.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Did you have an encounter with a Gorgon?
Oh, maybe I did. I don't know. The cat's out of the bag, guys. This is the Gorgon Medusa episode. If you're just joining us, Mythstorie is a show that picks a topic such as the Gorgon of ancient times, and we are going to give you a little story about the Gorgon, and then we're going to talk about some of the history and facts. Well, I always say facts, but I mean, I guess there are facts. There's
Happened
facts
so
on
long
myth.
ago, we don't know.
Right. But we're going to tell you a little more about it. And I have to say, we decided to do this a little bit ago, and I didn't know what to expect. I mean, we all obviously know who Medusa is, and you may not know the term Gorgon, but you definitely know Medusa. But looking into this, it's a little deeper and crazier. Not crazy. It's crazy how deep it is. That's what's crazy. So, let's just go right into it. Cammy, I know you've got a little story for us.
Sure. I wanted to give a shout out to Savannah, who gave us the last story in our last episode that we did with Peter. She also brought up that she'd like to hear about Medusa and gave me, a really good source. And so I'm going to go over my sources now. Ovid's Metamorphosis, Apollodorus the Library, Forbes.com, Rehabilitating Medusa, Powerful Women, Sexism, and Reading, Mary Beard's new book. That's by Sarah Bond. Wikipedia, Medusa and the Gray's Entry. TheAtlantic.com, The Original Nasty Woman by Elizabeth Johnston. ThoughtCo.com, The Curse of Medusa from Greek Mythology by DeTracy Regula. And bitchmedia.org, Snake Eyes, The Power to Turn the Patriarchy to Stone by Mackenzie Swark.
And Ovid, we're sourcing Ovid and bitchmedia.com in one episode.
Right. So we're all familiar with the story of a Gorgon with snakes for hair who would turn men to stone with her gaze. Most people are familiar with her death at the hands of the Greek hero Perseus. But I will tell you here for a refresher. So according to Apollodorus, Perseus had been ordered to bring the Gorgon's head back as a wedding gift for Hippodamia. He was reluctant, but with the help of Hermes, or Mercury, and Athena, or Minerva, decided to embark on his quest. His first stop was to see the Greys. These are the three women who were born as crones, so they were already old when they were born. They shared one eye and one tooth, and would pass it to each other when the other would have a need for it. Perseus needed to know either where the objects were that he needed to kill Medusa, or some other information, like where Medusa was located or something like that. But this, according to Apollodorus, he needed 3 items. He got the information he needed, and he set off to find these treasures. The helm of Hermes, the winged sandals of the nymphs, and there was a special bag called a kibiscus, where it's basically a wallet is kind of the translation, but he could safely store the head in it. And then Hermes, in addition to that, gave him a hooked blade to defeat the monster. Once the items were collected, he put on the cap, which hid him from sight. Then he put on the shoes, which allowed him to fly. He took to the air and flew to where the Gorgons were hiding. In this reading, Medusa was always a Gorgon, but she was mortal. This is why he was able to obtain her head. He snuck into her lair when all the Gorgons were asleep, passing statues of heroes frozen in time, but they were not meant to be statues. These were men who had peered upon the Gorgons, for their looks turned men to stone. Perseus used his bronze shield to navigate his way so he would not suffer the same fate. When he reached the sleeping 3, he peered into his shield and basically cut the head off Medusa looking into his shield. Now, I'll switch to Ovid because he has some details of Perseus's journey back. As Perseus flew, he passed over Ethiopia, where Andromeda was chained to a cliff. Curious of her crime, he spoke with her. Her crimes were nothing more than her beauty and the jealousy of men. As they were speaking, a great monster rose from the sea to swallow the girl. But Perseus, thinking quickly and remembering the head he carried in his bag, must still hold some power, because he saw snakes form from the drops of blood which hit the ground before he had stored it. He pulled out the head, and the great beast turned to stone. Perseus untied Andromeda and brought her back with him. He gave the head to Athena, who placed it on her shield. Now, I do want to do a bit of a content warning before I do this. There is sexual assault in this portion of it, so you can definitely stop here if you'd like. Now, that's the story we know, right? So that's the story of Perseus. He's, slayed this monster. He's a hero.
And he has he has her on it. We could do an episode on him, and because he has that head with him and uses it several more times.
Yes, yeah. He's doing these things. Great hero, all of that. If Medusa was born a monster, we could accept this as a hero's quest. But what if she was born immortal? According to some, Medusa was the keeper of the temple of Athena. She was greatly devoted to her goddess and kept the temple for her. Poseidon notices Medusa's great beauty and storms into the temple and rapes her in front of the statue of Athena. Instead of going after the god of the sea, Athena turns Medusa into the form we know her as today. Some say it was a punishment for being the victim to a crime, but modern readings argue that it was a way to protect the goddess from men and gods. So in that reading, she can turn a man to stone if he is looking at her. She's basically subverting the male gaze, which is where some of the bitch media and that sort of thing kind of talked about. And I thought it was a really interesting reading because I'd never thought of it in that way before.
Yeah.
I've always thought of it as okay, she was punished unjustly for this thing that was done to her. But now it's almost as if she herself is a hero now because she can protect herself from her attackers at this point.
Yeah.
But what do you have, Bryant?
Yeah, that it is. So it's insane how much there's a whole section on psychoanalysis and Medusa, and we got to talk about you can't mention psychoanalysis without mentioning Mr. Freud, right?
Right.
And so I'll start here. This will be a little weird, but I'll start here since it kind of connects well. And of course, he's got to go Oedipal with it. But it's interesting. So this is kind of I'm stupefying it for myself, but it's a dumbed down version of it all. So there's much more serious thought to it, and there's much more psychoanalysis to it than what I'm bringing up. But Freud sort of brought the cutting of Medusa's head to castration, or a sort of castration. I think with castration with Freud doesn't mean literal. I don't know. It's weird. Him and his mom. Him and moms. It's a weird thing.
Castrating the monster.
Well, no. It's like a sort of allegory. Seeing the monster. So the Medusa's head and the snakes are, from Freud's point of view, signify an allegory for female genitals, and seeing them is sort of a it's sort of a breaking of innocence in a way, and of course Freud kind of tied it into a boy and his mother, and then the fear of the punishment of the father. So piece that together how you will.
Okay, I kind of clicked what you're saying.
Right, and it clicks, but it's just dude.
It's obviously.
Chill out. Seek help.
Seek your own help. Stop doing cocaine.
I know. It's just I was reading this and I was okay, what? And I was who's doing this? It's not. No, but it was interesting, and there's some other theories that sort of go beyond that. I do like the kind of the idea. One thing that was mentioned in this little section in Wikipedia too is that Medusa never reportedly stoned women. That's another interesting takeaway here. Is that
I didn't know that. I was actually questioning
Yes.
that, but I didn't really look into it.
Right. Well, to look into it would require a lot, and from those who have, and the reports and the wonderful collections that we've seen, it looks like that wasn't ever the case in art or in literature or anything like that. And so that's just a very unique thing, is that she definitely was sort of, it was only to the men. But it is interesting, the history behind her. So I'll go behind that a little bit, because Medusa and her two sisters are what are called Gorgons, which comes from an old Greek word that means like fierce, terrible, and grim. And Phorcys and Cato are their parents, which are like I think that they're descendants of Oceanus as well. So we're getting close to like the primordial terror monster beings kind of thing.
Right.
I know Keto for one is like a crazy scary monster thing, if I remember right. But the Gorgons themselves, they've been around. They're just as ancient as the ancient stories. Again, for reference, when was Homer? Was he 800 BC? Hold on, let me.
I should probably know that. I've
No, I always look it up. He was born sometimes between the 12th and 8th centuries BC. That's from biography.com. I knew it was around the 8th is what I remembered off the top of my head. So think of Homer is somewhere between the 12th and 8th centuries BC for Homer. Well, Gorgon wrote about Homer wrote about Gorgons. Gorgons didn't write about Homer. Homer wrote about Gorgons, and so there's kind of that primary source material there. But they were super ingrained in Greek and ancient culture as well, and by art and terracotta and things like that, because we can see them in those very easily. And what's really interesting is the Gorgon imagery apparently goes as far back as, well, there's idea, like we see images on temples during the Archaic period in 700 BC, so just sort of after Homer's time. But the idea of the Gorgon is reportedly could go even far back, even further than that, before Homer. And so there's some reputes on that, but there's some interesting thoughts that when Homer wrote this stuff down, it was old news. It was stories then, and the Wikipedia articles put a really good way of putting it in like a pseudo religion or quasi religional sense or religious sense for the Greeks, and so it was just so ingrained in the culture. Everybody knew what a Gorgon was as but they evolved, of course. Anyway. It wasn't
sort
until
of like how we all know what one is because we see it on like the Versace logo.
Exactly. Yeah. The meaning, and just like in ancient times and the various like time eras, the meaning of it really changes because during the like classical and Hellenistic eras, so we're getting closer and to the end of the BC era. This is when we started seeing a shift. So before this time, the Gorgons were almost exclusively just these grotesque beings. So, like, I mean, they're really bad. They're like these bearded, big-mouthed, huge fangs. Sometimes have wings, claws, tusks. I mean, like, it's just like someone just saw every animal and put it into one.
Just every bad part of every animal.
Right, and just stuck it in there, and then of course snakes for hair. And so, but during the Hellenistic period and the classic and Hellenistic period, it started to change into the more humanistic, with the hair really being the main feature. And then kind of from that point on, it started to change. And it wasn't really until like Ovid's Metamorphosis that it became even more like popular. But there are reports too. I mean, like I said, it goes back. When Homer writes of the Gorgons, he writes of the image, the Gorgonea, which is like the head and face. That's what that's called, being featured on the Aegis of Zeus and Athena. Now, an Aegis, it's actually, I didn't realize this. Like, so Aegis is used in a lot of video games. and such, and it's pretty much like a shield, like that's what it is. And that's definitely an item of defense is like what its purpose is, but apparently it's not. It may not have just been a shield. It could have been like some kind of armor, like leathery armor or of some kind, or a specific piece of armor like that is actually worn on the body. And Zeus and Athena were said to have worn this image on them, or
like
Gorgon,
a breastplate kind of.
possibly. It's hard. It's unclear. It's unclear.
Okay.
But I know like a lot of video games will use it today, and it'll just be like usually like a very stereotypical Greek or Roman smaller circular shield, or something like that, or it could be a spell in a game that protects somebody. You know, it has that connotation where it's protecting someone or something, and that actually that idea grew, and it's interesting because Medusa's name in ancient Greek actually means to guard. Interestingly enough. And so over time, people would like the temples would feature her, and it seemed like the way I kind of came up with it myself is it was sort of like a monster to ward off monsters in a sense. Like I also wrote my notes, perhaps the get out of jail free card that Perseus had. Again, Perseus, like, so man, this dude, he's such a cheater. Invisibility, flying, like turn you into stone. Like, come on, dude, be like Heracles and just, pick up a lion and throw it. Perseus would use this head several more times to stop foes, or to like he stops Atlas. One famous thing. I'll hold off on saying more just because there's definitely an episode there in its own right. But I think like if we think of it in that way, if you've got a picture, a Gorgoneon is what it's actually called. If you've got a Gorgoneon in your temple or your shield or something like that, the idea is that you don't want to look at Medusa, so therefore it's going to keep things away. If you can't look at it, it's going to keep you away. So it's just this interesting. It reminds me of in Japan and China and other Asian cultures, the Shisa dogs. They'll have the little two dogs that you put like in front of your house that just kind of ward off evil spirits. That's sort of the feeling that I get from that.
Yeah, just like an item of protection.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting though, because it went from like horrible ancient monster that's so well known to like a Nike logo. I don't know, like it's just it's so well featured. Like the Gorgoneon is so well featured, and there's of course iconic imagery of Perseus slaying the Medusa. That's a very famous like image. And even I remember when I was in my Italian class a few semesters ago, I did a little presentation on Sicily, and their flag is a Gorgoneon head with, I can't remember, it's like a tri something, but it's like three legs coming out of it, and then three little things of wheat because of its abundance of wheat and how it fed empires for generations. But it's super important. I mean, if Sicily to this day, it's a representative symbol of them. I had started my research, like I metmuseum.org had a really great breakdown of it all, and it kind of introduced me to these ideas of the stories being older than what I thought. And in the first century BCE, when Ovid, he was sort of the first one to posit the story of Poseidon attacking, and like that didn't seem like it was a part of the story before. Also, the Gorgons before this and from now all time were known to be more immortal, but Medusa is not. And I guess, but she's also a sister. And it was interesting because I was like, well, these two other Gorgons are just, they're oh god, it's hard to say, Stetheno, and
it's okay.
I said it in my head earlier. Hold on. Stheno. There we go. Stheno and Euryale are the sisters, and they've always been Gorgons apparently, and they're immortal. Medusa became a sister later and is not immortal, obviously. So it's really interesting. I didn't look too much on Stheno and Euryale. Medusa's the one that's the most well known. Their names each mean something though. Medusa, like Stheno and Euryale's name sort of means something with a kind of a negative connotation, but Medusa's is the one that kind of means to guard. And like I said, it was really Ovid who kind of posited that later. Another interesting thing that I've read is the so like yeah, the punishment that Medusa, if she was just a shrine maiden who was punished for doing essentially nothing, as Poseidon gets to go scot free, it's really interesting. And there was a book. I'm trying to look through my notes. I'll have to probably add it in later. I had it in my history. It looks like I didn't save it, but there's an idea that because of Zeus's basically daddy issues, the problems that she had with Zeus are sort of like the stemming. That was her reaction. So it's really Athena's the one to blame, which we can say that a lot, I'm sure. But that's sort of what the idea is that because of Athena's always quarreling with Zeus, and Athena has such pull and power over the domain, though, when this happens, she's upset and she's furious, but she can't. I don't know, like, sort of what led to her not punishing Poseidon in some way or reprimanding.
Well, how would she punish Poseidon?
Right.
Like, what could she possibly do? I mean, he's the ruler of the sea. There's nothing she can do. Right.
But yeah, there is just that in itself has a lot behind it there. There's a ton of study there. So yeah, that's sort of the basics. The Met Museum website had a really, really cool write-up of it, especially because it kind of focused on the art aspect of it, of course. But it is incredibly crazy how deep just the idea goes. One thing that Cammy and I talked about too is that this legend might actually be the Wikipedia calls it it could be an idea of a quasi-historical or sublimated memory of an actual invasion. So basically there was an attack on, was it Athenian priests? The Hellens overran the goddess's chief shrines and stripped her priestesses of their Gorgon masks, and later being aptotropic faces worn to frighten away the profane. The latter being so they would wear these masks to frighten away profane, and they were attacked by the Hellens. And so this could be, the attack in general could be a sort of a remembering that got morphed into a quasi-historical. So this event happened, but it's Medusa.
But they made like a mythology around it.
Right. Yeah. Like, so there was a temple that would, like, and other temples would have, Gorgonian imagery, but there was this temple that was attacked by Hellens, destroyed, and the mass destroyed, and then that word was spread, and like you play that game, what was it called, like Phone Call or whatever, where you like whisper something into someone's ear in a circle, and then by the end of it, it goes,
and then Homer writes it down at the end, and it's not anything like the original.
And then he's cashing in on the royalties. So that's a really cool way, and that also ties into Freudian stuff as well, like this actual historic rupture, sociological trauma, which kind of gets turned into a myth, and then kind of morphs over time. So it's kind of wild. Yeah,
there was definitely more here than I originally thought there would be. When Savannah suggested it, I was like, yes, of course we'll do it. I'm not sure how much is going to really be there. Right. And then come to find out, this is, just way more fast than I expected.
It's interesting because we've done similar stories, like Greek or Roman myths that we've talked about, and it's typically just you talk about it. But what's interesting about this one is because the myth is so old and the idea is so old of Gorgons and Medusa, it's been used in imagery for so long, and the imagery will take different meanings and it'll change. And so Medusa would you'd have depending on what year it was, having Medusa on your shield could mean something completely different, or would be different for someone else. It's I think of it kind of like how Hercules is so universal and different, and how I can find a story of Hercules in Spain and Morocco, and I can do all these things because and the thing that connects him is his name in a way, Medusa.
Right.
But Medusa is interesting because it takes on like an intellectual sort of argument here, rather than like a cultural or regional like Hercules would. I'm sure there's tons of intellectual crap behind Hercules for sure, but the story is
the idea is Athena, subverting the patriarchy, or is she upholding it?
Right. Yeah.
Through the
Yeah.
punishment.
The source that I like, it sort of seemed like, yeah, she like lost her cool essentially, and she didn't. Right. Yeah. Like and that's the way you could think of it. Well, was she giving Medusa the tools she needed, or was she punishing her because she was just PO'd and couldn't do anything about it? But even then, there's even more to it. I mean, Freud obviously can see things we don't, but there's even more.
It's the cocaine.
I know, yeah. It's really wild. I really like how wide this goes, and how the Gorgons can be. I mean, just go to the Wikipedia and you can see imagery where they look like just beasts, or where they look fine, and there's like it's a woman, or a man.
Yeah,
like,
I did actually see where some authors, and I cannot remember which it was, if it was in Ovid or Apollodorus, but she was so beautiful
Mm-hmm.
that it turned men to stone. Like, it may not have even been that she was a monster. It was like so and so said. It may have even been one of those other articles that I read too, now that I'm thinking about it, because both of them saw her as like a snake-haired beast. But yeah, she was so beautiful that she would turn men to stone if they gazed upon her.
Oh, sure, like as a means of preservation in a way.
Yeah, so that would go more towards the other,
Right.
towards
Yeah,
Athena protecting her.
I totally forgot too, in my section where we kind of talk about the protective aspects. There's sort of a theory that there's the idea of like an evil eye, which is prominent in certain myths and legends, especially like in Hindu mythology, like the Kali.
Yeah, we
and
talked
other myths like that.
about that a little bit in, was it the
Sahir?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That was a good episode. But the Gorgonean is a great way to counter that in a way. And if you think about it, that's totally right. I mean, Medusa, the Gorgonean head, you don't want to look at it. And so, but it's interesting. So that would be the perfect defense against someone who's sort of inflicting the evil eye.
Yeah, it would.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a really interesting way of taking that. I almost forgot that.
Well, let's all get each other Medusa bracelets or something.
Yeah, Gorgoneons out for everybody. Yeah. So before I forget my sources, I kind of took a little bit. Like I said, I started with Met Museum, of course, Wikipedia, but Ancient EU had a nice little summary of the story. I knew the story of I knew that Perseus killed Medusa, but I didn't realize it was a gift for his mom's lover, basically, is what I wrote. Because he couldn't be bothered. Oh, but sorry, I'll give you any gift you want. Okay, like how about the invisible cap or the flying wings, or like come on.
Well, then he gave it to Athena in the end, so.
I know, it's insane. But then also Greek mythology.com.
Wait. He was supposed to find a horse as the gift, but he didn't get a horse for whatever reason. I didn't really read so much into it.
Oh, sure. And do you remember what happened immediately after Medusa's head flew off her shoulders?
Oh yeah, Pegasus sprang out of it, right?
And his brother, oh god, how do you pronounce it? Chrysaor, the giant.
What is that?
Chrysaor. Chrysaor is let me see real quick what I'm just going to pull up the Wikipedia real fast. It's this It's the brother of the winged horse Pegasus, often depicted as a young man, the son of Poseidon and Gorgon Medusa, and Pegasus is the son of Poseidon and Medusa.
I did know that. Okay, so this
and
was like
yes,
just in her the whole time. Huh.
yes, yeah, they were inside of her and were birthed
Through her neck.
They shot out of her neck. They sprang from her neck when she was cut. Headed her a higher birth, such as the birth of Athena from the head of Zeus. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, because
that's how Athena was born too. That is kind of weird.
So, oh God, yeah. Christ's sword doesn't seem to be like super talked about, but he was said to be born with a golden sword in his hand too. Yeah,
There's
that's
so
wild.
much here.
I know, and then if they're born in the same way that Athena was born, maybe this was Athena's plan to get Pegasus and Chrysaor out. I mean, how important is Pegasus? You know?
Yeah, there's so much. There's just so much.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. I will be linking. I'm gonna find that piece. I apologize for not finding what I talked about with sort of the idea of studying Athena's kind of part in this. But there's also this great book, an older book it was published in 1955, but it was written by Jane Ellen Harrison, who died in 1928. So I guess it was like a posthumous thing, but it's not copyrighted. I'm gonna link that. It's called Prolegomena to the Study of Greek Religion, and this was linked in the Wikipedia further reading section and sources, and it talked about it's the source that talked about this predating Homer by a long time, and being sort of by going way back. And it also talked about certain things. It talks about like a lot of Greek religious influence and harpies as well, who like apparently the harpies, the winged, the bird-like women, there was some crossover between the harpies and the gorgons in some aspects, but it's really cool. I've flipped through a few pages. I basically you can control F it. You can put it in Google or PDF, Amazon, Kindle, whatever you want to do, and then control F, and that's what I did. And I just looked at whatever bits and bobs there were on Gorgons and Medusa. So I'll put that in there. I've got that saved for sure.
Cool.
Well, Cammy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bryant.
Has been a can of worms that we opened.
And then there was like a little worm at the bottom that we found as well at the end.
I know. And there's still way more. So, but yeah, check out that link, and I'll link it was an article. You have to, I only read the abstract of it. You have to pay to get the rest. But guys, we hope you enjoyed the episode. Please let us know what you think. And if you have any suggestions, let us know. Thanks again, Savannah, for everything you've been helping us out with lately. It's really appreciate it. We really appreciate the support and all that. Well, Cammy, I and they will see you next time, right? Okay, guys. So right after we finished recording, I found it, and this is really interesting. So the International Journal of Psychoanalysis is where this is at. It's by Beth J. Sealing. It's called The Rape of Medusa in the Temple of Athena, Aspects of Triangulation in the Girl. And so this is an interesting thing. Like I said, the way she kind of presents it is the focus of Athena's relationship with Zeus, as well as the I'm going to quote, the hostility she displays toward other females, and sort of female development, especially like younger girls who are being developed. So a sort of, again, we've talked about it. We've beaten this a little bit, but there's still so much to go on. But I guess there's something to say here about events happening, that turn you outside of your control, that turn you into a monster, that make you feel like a monster, or make others see you as a monster. I don't think that's exactly what Dr. Sealing is saying right here, but this is really cool. I'll link it. I'm sure you could. It's from 2002, so if you check certain journal sites, you might be able to get a free copy, or some more on it at least. So she probably has other work, But yeah, that's, oh God, it's insane. And
Well, thanks for finding that.
Yeah, no problem. All right, guys. See ya.
Bye.